If a scientist created a virus that killed and mutated everyone into Darkseekers except you, the last surviving virologist, what would you do? In this How to Beat video, we'll follow Dr. Neville, see if we can make better decisions, and ultimately attempt to beat the Darkseekers in I Am Legend. If you think you have a better way, let me know in the comments. If you like these How to Beat videos, consider subscribing. We start out following the news with Dr. Alice Crippen giving us the skinny on her new bioweapon against diseases.
You can imagine your body as a highway, and you picture the virus as a very fast car being driven by a very bad man. Imagine the damage that car could cause. But then if you replace that man with a cop, the picture changes, and that's essentially what we've done.
Dr. Crippen mentions that her cancer-killing virus was created by re-engineering the measles virus, and that there have been 10,009 clinical trials in humans so far, all of whom are cancer-free now. It seems crazy and reckless, but it's not. This is called oncolytic virotherapy, and get ready for it. Clinical trials testing a re-engineered measles virus as an experimental cancer therapy is currently underway. It's not as dangerous as you might think though. The virus is attenuated to only be able to replicate inside of cancer cells. Once the cancer's gone, the virus dies off. The measles virus is a good oncolytic platform because it's inherently more selective and potent against cancer cells. The vast majority of the world's population has been vaccinated for its dangerous effects, and its airborne and bodily fluids transmission methods can be restricted. It isn't without risks though. One of the main goals of OV creation is limiting the spread and transmission of them. They usually have containment measures, monitoring, and contingency plans implemented. But for viruses like measles, where there's already a widespread population immunity, it can be considered unnecessary. While OVs are generally repurposed from genetically stable viruses like measles, mutations that cause viruses to gain new cell tropisms or lose restriction factors is a significant concern. Due to this evolutionary capacity present in OVs, safety kill switches that are engineered into the virus's genome are being developed. These kill switches are not reliable for the same reason that caused us to create them in the first place: mutations. According to the FDA's clinical trial phases, this virus is in phase 4, so it has completed years of testing in humans. They should know about any dangerous effects of this OV by now, so how did everything go wrong? My best guess is that a black swan mutation occurred, reactivating previously terminated pathology and inactivating kill switches. A pre-existing viral immunity can seriously hinder the efficacy of the OV, which is the case with the measles vaccinations. So it's possible that Dr. Crippen and her team chose to alter the OV to bypass this immunity, increasing the risk of an epidemic spread. This mutated virus could easily jump containment because measles is one of the most infectious diseases in the world. The Crippen virus outbreak wasn't caused by sheer recklessness, it was just insanely unlucky. 3 years later, we see that the world was ravaged by the virus, and nature is starting to consume human civilization. It would appear that containment and contingency plans had failed, but hey, at least they cured cancer. Unless you are part of a tribe living in the Amazon rainforest, this virus would be inescapable. Since this is 3 years post-outbreak, you, or should I say your corpse, would be decomposed into a pile of bones by now, with maggots having picked off the last remaining pieces of flesh attached to your skeleton. NYC is really peaceful now. And to think, all we had to do was get rid of 8 million people. Speaking of, where are the 8 million skeletons? Oh right, the PG-13 god lifted them all to heaven. I'd like to see an R-rated version where Will Smith is trudging through thousands and thousands of bones littered all throughout the streets and buildings. We start out following Dr. Robert Neville, a military virologist who is tearing up the streets in a Shelby Mustang with an AR-15 in his lap and a German Shepherd in the side seat. Yep, this is how I would envision myself in the apocalypse if I ever made it that far. If you watched my other I Am Legend video where I talk about how to beat Dr. Neville as the Darkseekers, you'll see why Neville surviving this long is highly unlikely. As we'll later see, the Darkseekers, which are the infected that turned rabid instead of dead, well, surprisingly they like the dark. Knowing this, I try to swipe some night vision goggles, or better yet, thermal goggles off the military. The virus doesn't seem to have infected animals, which makes makes sense because measles is not spread by animals. Hunting wild animals drive-by style with a supercharged V8 muscle car seems impractical, but this is 3 years into surviving alone and looks fun as hell. Neville failed to bag a deer in his car, so he tries the stealth approach. I'm not a hunter, but from what I've read, I highly doubt you could sneak up within rock-throwing distance of a wild deer like that, especially with his rifle parts clacking, footsteps, smell, and his dog. At least he's not directly downwind. Using deer traps or just waiting for a deer to cross your path would be more effective than chasing it through the city. Without humans around, the animal population would explode, so it shouldn't be too hard to catch one. Looks like the lioness was the more effective hunter this time. Maybe this was his first encounter with the lions, but knowing they're out here now, I'd be more cautious roaming the streets. Neville did decently well here, as you're supposed to slowly back away with your front toward the lion. If you're wondering where all the deer and wild animals came from, New York City has 3 major zoos that they could have come from. The zoos also house grizzly bears and snow leopards, so it might be a good idea to stop by and see what animals escaped or died. His watch beeps, indicating sundown is approaching, and he knows they mostly come out at night. Mostly. His alarm is set for 5:23. Why not a nicer number like 5:25? He's clearly losing it mentally. Since the sun goes down at 8 p.m. in New York City, he's got 2.5 hours to get home before he becomes the hunted. 2.5 hours is good because if he hit a deer or his car broke down, he could walk the entire length of Manhattan before sundown. Neville returns to his home, which has IEDs surrounding it for defense. He uses vinegar to block his scent so that the Darkseekers can't track him down, which is good because our human scent can linger on the ground or things we touch for many days. What I'm confused about is how did the Darkseekers have that good of smell, and how did Neville know about it? He must have been lucky enough to witness their capabilities early on, or else they'd have found and killed him. Neville's got an excellent stock of food, and the canned food he has can pretty much last his lifetime if stocked correctly. In addition to bagging the occasional deer, he won't be in danger of starving. According to the fridge poster, Neville was a top military virologist working on the Crippen Virus, which could explain how he knew about the mutation causing a heightened sense of smell. During Sam's bath, the second beep on his watch happens, signaling lockdown. How are you not gonna get a neck crook sleeping like that? Sleeping in the bathtub right next to the window is not a good idea. Sound transmits through windows much more than walls. Brick wall has a sound transmission class rating of around 50, which blocks most loud noises, whereas single pane windows are around 20, which won't even block a normal voice. If Sam gets spooked and starts barking when a Darkseeker wanders close by, it's over. His primary defense is not being found. Once they know his location, the Darkseekers or any determined attacker could make entry to his home with enough time, energy, and some primitive tools. Neville's setup is basically a brick house, armored windows, some traps outside, and various guns placed around the house. With his military knowledge, all the time in the world, and endless amounts of supplies, I think he can do better. Armored windows are good, but you'd also want to armor the interior walls that joined your house with the adjacent house, as well as soundproof the house with acoustic sound barriers. What he's really missing is a dedicated safe room if shit gets real. He could repurpose one of his rooms and build a reinforced concrete bunker, with a door that leads directly outside into the sunlight, so if he is caught, he can safely exit at sunrise. With sunlight coming within 8 hours maximum, you don't really need much in the way of food, water, supplies, plumbing, or power. Neville has a PTSD flashback to the start of the outbreak, where he's trying to get his family out of NYC before the military quarantine. He remarks that the virus went airborne, suggesting that they did originally restrict this transmission method, but the virus had mutated.
The window is still open. We find something in a week or 2 weeks, we can reverse the spread.
Yeah, finding a cure, mass producing it, and distributing it is not going to happen in 2 weeks. Staying in Manhattan because it's ground zero for the virus makes no sense either. Finding the primary case or patient zero is irrelevant. You already know the cause of the disease, how it came into existence, and how it broke containment. It will not help you find a cure at all, but even if it did, it's going to be tough to continue your research with most of the Manhattan residents turning into zombies. With the severity of the pandemic, he should have been evacuated to a nearby Navy ship like the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, which is stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, where he could meet up with Dr. Rachel Scott. There, they could either set up a makeshift lab to continue research, or just get the hell out of there and start a new society. Damn, Will Smith is jacked. Treadmills indoors is actually smart. You don't want to be at the last round of your sprints when shit hits the fan. You need all the energy, alertness, and prowess possible, especially with fucking lions using Manhattan as a hunting ground during the day. Normally, I'd say get out into the countryside and only make the occasional trips into the city for supplies. But he's trying to use his own genetic innate immunity to find a cure in his basement virology lab. I think it's important to make the distinction of prophylactic versus therapeutic vaccines. Prophylactic is used to bolster the immune system with antibodies ready to fight a potential threat. Therapeutic is more synonymous with cure, as they're used to treat those already infected with a virus by enhancing the immune system's targeting or responsibilities. He's not working on a prophylactic vaccine because it's impossible. To produce a vaccine from someone's blood, a person needs to have the correct antibodies in their system, which know how to fight the infection. Because Neville has an innate genetic immunity, he will never have had an adaptive immune response to the virus, which would have produced Crippen antibodies in his blood. Also, there's no point. As Neville points out later, you could count with your fingers the amount of uninfected without an innate immunity. Even if you could create a vaccine, a highly mutable disease like KV will have a very low efficacy rate. If that wasn't a problem, how would you even get the vaccine to these people? If for some reason he stumbled into a large group of survivors that didn't have a genetic immunity, he should start with studying Darkseeker blood and work to find or develop a weakened form of the virus that could be used as an immunological trigger, which coincidentally is how the measles vaccine was created. Neville is instead trying to reverse the Darkseeker's condition by creating a therapeutic vaccine based on his own innate immunity. This is also impossible, as the immunity is based on his genetics. You could theoretically create a cure by enhancing everyone's innate immune system, but that's not what Neville's talking about. Funnily enough, oncolytic viruses fall under the therapeutic vaccine umbrella, so he could create another Neville OV, which would destroy the existing Crippen OV everyone's infected with, like fighting fire with fire. I mean, why not give it a shot? It's not like you can mess up and kill 7 billion people again. Neville's not using the proper methods to create a cure, but it doesn't matter if he was. The proper methods for creating a cure for this disease would be in the realm of bleeding edge research. Considering this movie was in 2007 as well, I don't think Neville will be making any breakthroughs by himself in a basement lab with no internet to research from or colleagues to work with. Even if he did develop a magical cure that worked, there's the massive problem of mass manufacturing it and forcibly distributing it to the Darkseekers who want to murder and eat you. These aren't your sickly people on hospital beds. You can't just dart them with a cure either, because the other Darkseekers will just brutally murder them. You need to bring them back to a hospital to restrain, monitor, and keep them safe from the other Darkseekers. As impossible as it is, working to find a cure may be the only thing keeping Neville sane in this post-apocalyptic world. Since the cure idea is ludicrous, it's probably time to load the truck with supplies and head out into the countryside. With how easy it is to find Neville as a Darkseeker, even without making a mistake, it's just a matter of time before they find him. Neville is too stubborn and determined though. Locking the door does make sense. It would ensure that no Darkseekers were hiding in or sleeping in the store somewhere, because they'd have to have broken down the windows or door. I've always thought that the most underestimated thing in the apocalypse was entertainment, so you don't go crazy. He's lucky these physical stores still exist. In the future, when it's all Netflix and digital, there won't be any physical movies, music, or games available. If you're planning on making a doomsday shelter, you might want to get a 100 terabyte storage device and load it up with movies, games, and music. You could put enough movies on it to last you a literal lifetime, or you might be able to fit Call of Duty Modern Warfare on it. He's got his map crossing off locations he's looted already. I don't see any pie slicing though. Ideally, you'd want to clear the entire house before letting your guard down. I also think he should have rigged a UV light attachment for his weapon. Having a gun is still necessary for putting them down fast, from a distance or through barriers, but the lamps would be a good close-range mob deterrent. There's another newspaper saying that infected dogs can come out at dusk, probably because their fur gives them some protection against UV rays. I guess KV can be transmitted to animals after all. Neville's broadcasting an SOS message on all AM frequencies. This is a good call. AM is used instead of FM because the lower frequency band means the signal can travel longer distances and penetrate better through barriers like buildings. He's broadcasting at midday every day, but he should also try to have the radio automatically broadcast a message at night. In daytime, the AM signal can travel maybe 100 miles, but at nighttime the signal can travel hundreds of miles by reflection from the ionosphere, a phenomenon called skywave propagation. This would at least triple or quadruple the radius of his SOS message. Like we saw earlier, there's no need to chase down a deer, nor would you even be able to physically. Neville's dog, Sam, chases the buck into a dark building that likely has Darkseekers napping inside. Honestly, if he didn't go after Sam and Sam got killed, Neville would lose it mentally and die. Chronic loneliness can lead to a 15-year shorter lifespan on average, and this is based on a study where human civilization has not been wiped out with you being the last man on Earth. It's safe to say that his dog is the only thing holding him together, and his survival literally depends on Sam's survival. This would be a good time to have thermal goggles with UV lights on your weapon, or if you could rig something together like in Riddick Pitch Black but with UV light tubes. In some cases, you can see recent footprints with thermal goggles, which could indicate where Darkseekers are or where your dog went. Hopefully that was the deer and not Sam. The hand over the light seems to add some suspense, I guess, but the Pentagon MD3R laser light he has can be activated with a pressure pad on the foregrip. He's using a 4x sight called an ACOG, which isn't ideal for urban environments where you're room clearing most of the time. Adding a canted red dot or swapping it for an EOTech with a 3x magnifier would be a better option and should have been accessible to him. Fuck, that tension when he sees the deer. In his pursuit of Sam, he runs into a group of Darkseekers in a huddle, sleeping while standing to hibernate, supposedly. Like with the zombies in Cargo, why not lie down instead? He finds Sam and manages to not run into a dead end in this dark maze of a building. Neville jumps from the second or third story with a Darkseeker jumping out after him. The Darkseeker's body breaks his fall and burns to death within seconds. He lays a trap to get another specimen for his clinical trials, and one takes the bait.
Welcome to Earth.
Seems like snaring a Darkseeker pissed off the other members of the hive. Well, that's fucking terrifying. I'd have blasted that dude right there. The Alpha retreats back into the shadows and Neville transports the subject back to his lab. He injects her with his breakthrough therapeutic vaccine, which fails like the many cures he's tried in the past. Neville remarks in his logs that the recent blood tests confirm he's still immune to the Crippen Virus, while canines are immune to the airborne strain only. That's a good move. With how mutable KV is, it's important to continuously test your immunity to it, but you might also want to be wearing better PPE in case the airborne virus becomes infectious to you. It also doesn't seem like a good idea to have been petting your dog after your close encounter earlier though. He also says that behaviorally, he thinks that the Darkseekers are ignoring basic survival instincts due to declining brain function and food scarcity. Or maybe they just have a social structure and got pissed when you snared one of their people. Sounds humanish to me. Neville has another flashback to their escape in the initial outbreak. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you live in New York City and something like this happens, you're dead. If I was living in New York City, I'd get a paramotor. If shit goes down, you can go to the roof and fly off of it and out of the city. It's a pro survivor move you'll only hear about here. Going for the bridge gates like the other 8 million infected and panicking people isn't a good idea. But Neville has a military escort. At the evacuation points, they're using eye scanners to detect capillary damage in the eyes.
No good. No good.
What?
I am Lieutenant Colonel Robert Neville. I'm ordering you to scan her again. Scan her again!
All right, scan her again.
Wow, Wow, what an effective testing tool. By now the virus is spreading like wildfire. People are turning into Darkseekers, and the military is blowing up bridges with missiles. If the threat is that severe, you would not be using a low accuracy testing tool, which is letting the infected slip out of the city. You would quarantine it immediately, nobody out. For VIPs like Neville, who's a top military virologist, you don't have them run for the border like everyone else. You evacuate them immediately and then quarantine them at a secure destination, like the Navy ship I mentioned earlier. Neville's driving home at sundown per usual, but he sees Fred in a place he's not supposed to be at. Fred's head turning is just Neville's hallucination from personifying them so much. A sane mind would recognize this as a trap, but Neville's not only underestimating their intelligence, but has clearly lost it mentally. Getting snared, banging his head, knocking him unconscious, the fall, getting shivved by his own knife. This evening is not going well. He needs to get his ass moving though. He tries to pull the knife out, but it's actually better to leave the knife in because pulling it out could allow cut blood vessels that are being squeezed and blocked by the knife to begin bleeding profusely. With this Darkseeker utilizing dogs to get him, it's clear Neville seriously underestimated them in his behavioral assessments. He almost gets his throat ripped out, but Sam fights off another dog and tackles the one attacking Neville. Unfortunately, Sam got bit. God damn, this is hard to watch. He brings Sam back to his home and injects her with a potential cure that appeared successful on a test rat, but the compound is unsurprisingly ineffective. Seconds later, Sam becomes fiercely aggressive and attempts to bite Neville. To save himself and spare Sam the pain and suffering of being a canine Darkseeker, Neville is forced to strangle her. I'm gonna go hug my dog now. Sure, Neville could have restrained Sam until he found his fictional cure, but I think he wanted to spare his dog the agony. The emptiness, loneliness, and irreversibility is just crushing. I don't know how much willpower he has left to survive at this point. Neville goes full suicidal rage mode, trying to take down as many with him as possible. Before he's killed by the Alpha, he's rescued by another survivor who heard his call on the radio. If only she came a day earlier. Before slipping into unconsciousness, he manages to tell her his house address and that she needs to keep driving until dawn so the Darkseekers can't track them home. Flashback, and his wife and son are killed in a helicopter crash because another heli flew into them. Thanks, brain, for that lovely dream. He wakes up and his rescuer had patched up his knife wound, given him some antibiotics, and fixed him breakfast. This woman is a goddamn angel. Neville gets pissed when Anna gives him what he thinks is false hope, that there's a survivor colony in Vermont. Anna says that the virus can't survive the cold up there, which is a little misguided. Cold temperatures can decrease the viral activity, but inversely can increase the survivability of measles-like viruses. But the virus will persist if it's inside a host regardless of weather. The incidence of the KV disease is more likely to be affected by the amount of sunlight exposure in an area, as well as human behavior and density. Anna's really quick on the draw. That was actually impressive. Ethan was quick to draw a knife too. Good to see he's not a typical useless or rebellious child. Neville starts the nightly lockdown procedure, and Anna tells him that the next morning they're heading to the survivor colony.
There's a whole colony of people there who didn't get sick. The virus couldn't survive the cold. There's a whole...
Everybody's dead. Everybody is dead.
Yeah, the numbers don't look good, but there could be a survivor colony. It's only a 4-hour drive to Vermont, at least check it out. Even if you stupidly wanted to continue research at your ground zero, you could cooperate with them and cure your loneliness. Going to Vermont is off the table anyways, because the Darkseekers managed to track them back home. Based on the numbers, you're potentially dealing with thousands of Darkseekers. Those window barriers are probably meant to prevent Darkseekers from randomly breaking in, not for stopping a determined attack. His setup was bound to fail. If you did want to do exterior light setups, you'd want the light to have 360 degrees of coverage so they couldn't just walk up behind the pole and take it down. His IED looked like C4 attached to fuel drums. It would have been much more effective to tape ball bearings or nails on the outside of the container to increase fragmentation. The blast killed a lot of them, but the Alpha survived and tackles him to the ground. Instead of immediately snapping Neville's neck with his superhuman strength, he just throws him around, which gives Neville an opportunity to fight back. Neville finds Anna hiding under a bed from a Darkseeker Darkseeker, grabs a pistol, and pumps it full of lead. A normal person can shrug off 9mm rounds in the heat of the battle through adrenaline if they aren't hitting critical locations. So these Darkseekers are not going to be phased until you hit something like the heart, brain, or spine, which will stop them instantly. This is when a dedicated safe room would come in handy, just saying. They just now realized that the cure was working, but they're cornered in the basement, so production and distribution is going to be tough.
Stop! Stop! Look! I can save you! I can help you! You are sick, and I can help you!
I don't blame the Darkseekers for not wanting to be injected with another oncolytic virus. All hope is shattered with a plexiglass barrier between them and the Darkseekers being broken down. It looks like he used an acrylic plexiglass sheet for this containment room with how easily it was broken and how it shattered. Using this for containment of his Darkseeker patients was dumb considering how easily it was broken by a few headbutts. He should have used 12mm thick polycarbonate sheets instead, which are hundreds of times stronger than glass and thin acrylic panes. The polycarbonate sheets flex, rebound, and pretty much can't be broken or shattered with blunt objects. The Darkseekers dropping their shoulders into it, headbutting it, punching it, or throwing shit at it will have zero effect. Neville, Anna, and Ethan would still be trapped in there, but at least they wouldn't be dead. Since he's unable to reach the cure compound, he pulls the blood of the cured Darkseeker, which contains the antibodies, and tucks Anna and Ethan into a coal chute. At dawn, they can crawl to the other end of the chute, which leads outside, and escape to Vermont with a cure. There is room for Neville, but he knows that the Darkseekers won't stop unless he kills them. Apparently, he keeps a grenade stashed in a medical drawer next to a picture of his family. He says his goodbyes, pulls the pin, releases the lever, and bombs the Darkseekers. An M67 grenade wouldn't create that fireball, and with a kill radius of 5 meters, it wouldn't kill all of the Darkseekers in that room either. Killing the Alpha may be enough though. I really think he could have tossed the grenade through a broken area of the barrier and then gotten into the coal chute in the 4 to 5 seconds before the grenade went off. Anna and Ethan make it to the survivor colony the next day and hand off the cure. I looked up whether or not antibodies in a blood sample would survive Anna and Ethan's journey, and it does seem like they would. Letting them in without running any tests is dangerous. How do they know they're not infected or carriers of the disease? The cure handoff seems like an achievement, but it's not. With the only living virologist and functioning virology lab getting blown up, they don't have the means to store, study, or replicate the cure, let alone mass produce, distribute, and sustainably incorporate the cured into their society. Also, that wall is ridiculous. There's no way they got enough concrete for it or erected the walls without huge cranes and trucks. The movie ends. Let's recap how things could have gone down differently. The cure for cancer that Dr. Alice Crippen created wasn't reckless or crazy. They just got extremely unlucky that the virus mutated enough. The Navy should have secured a ship for Neville to safely continue his research on, but with how fast the outbreak spread, maybe they just couldn't. Neville's family's death wasn't really preventable. With how impossible it was for Neville to create a cure, it'd be entirely reasonable to head into the countryside to start a new life. And who knows, he might have run into the survivor colony. Doing so would have prevented Sam and Neville's death, and all the Darkseekers, not that we care about them though. If he did want to continue pursuing a cure, building a dedicated safe house would have prevented the situation where Neville was forced to frag himself. This means Neville would have survived, though Sam still would have died. With Neville alive, the cure would have a much better chance at being replicated and distributed than in the hands of the common folk at the colony. I still doubt that the cure could be effectively utilized. It's more likely that the immune human population will grow, and the Darkseekers, like other less intelligent species, will be roller-packed into a parking lot for the humans. I'd say that the tragic events that unfolded in this movie could have been prevented, so this movie is beaten. Thanks for watching, and remember, there's no greater danger than underestimating your opponent.